What's up, everybody? My name is Sam Slade. You know that already. Welcome to an all-new episode of Weirdos at Home, and I am so fucking excited about this one, guys. It's a Saturday morning. My guest today, I would probably say, is the most underrated improv comic mind that you may not be familiar with. It's Tim O'Malley, ladies and gentlemen, and I'm honored to have him on. Thank you so much for making some time on a Saturday morning.
Great to be here, Sam. Good to see you.
Man,
And thanks for the very kind words.
oh please, I'm just getting started, man. You were the older I've gotten, the more I it makes sense. I've always told people about my time at Second City. I had one really fun teacher, and that was Kevin Riome, who I'm sure you know.
Yeah.
And he was the fun like middle school coach. And then it feels like I got to the high school team, and I had you, and it was the bullshit was over. And listening to you talk about Del Close, it seemed to me like some things rubbed off in your teaching style.
Yeah, I plucked a few things from him, although I got strong opinions about his lifestyle and how that affected some students. I
Well,
still I don't like to call him a guru, but some do. But I do credit him for putting improvisation on the legitimate map, because before him, you couldn't find a review of the Second City. You couldn't find a review of a small comedy group in any of the newspapers, and then it just all of a sudden became legitimate. And even in my first improv group, we could get reviewed in the Reader, and get and sometimes started doing articles. And so I give him a lot of credit for putting improvisation on the map as legitimate.
well,
Because the old,
for folks watching that don't know, who don't have the love, up and down love affair with Second City the way you and I do over the years. Del Close started IO. He was a Second City director. Legend has it he got Belushi into drugs. Legend has it there's a legend that you'd be able to speak to this better than anyone I know, was the guy that turned to L. Ron Hubbard at a diner and said, "If you don't want to pay taxes, start a church. Quit bitching."
all I'm just going to tell you, all the legends are bullshit.
Well, I'd expect
99% of them are pretty much bullshit.
well, it turned into an amazing urban legend that I think kids sometimes got the wrong idea from. But I listened to you on a podcast from maybe a year ago, and just the way you were talking about Dell kind of putting you in timeout for trying to force the funny. It took me straight back to Piper's Alley in moments where I think I got put in timeout by you a couple times for trying to go for the joke instead of developing the scene and going for what we're here to do.
Yeah, back on the positive side, his ideas were imaginative and original about finding the truth in a scene, and and having it come naturally, and all kinds of like very original ideas, like following a filter. He'd give you a word, or he'd ask you to think of a word and then just follow that word throughout the scene, uh, and that you would naturally find a way out with, once you found it, and then found it with someone else. And there was just all kinds of amazing. I still have my Dell notebooks and my Donnie notebooks, and they're crammed with stuff that I put in my teachings.
That's I
So on
mean,
the positive side, his ideas were, were they were completely original, and super fantastic from an artistic point of view. And he insisted that he said, if you want to get hired by Second City, go study with Donnie DePolo. who was the director of the touring company at the time. He goes, but I want you to consider this a class that you're learning how to act through improvisation. And I'm teaching you acting, but it's through the medium of improvisation. So he was pretty serious about the work.
Yeah, and that rubbed off. That's the way I remember you, as being serious about the work. And I've got to give you credit. We'll get the heavier stuff out of the way. I got away with. I was a lot more wild than I am these days at 25, 24, 25, 26 in Second City. And I was hell bent on being the next the wild guy from Second City that got Saturday Night Live. And I remember at one point you literally I don't know, it was like a late afternoon class, and it's clear I had been somewhere I shouldn't have been before that class, and I must have stormed in the room, sweaty and a mess, and you probably don't remember this, but you asked me to step outside with you, and you told me to my face, you can kill it in class, you can kill it on stage or at Comedy Jam. But this fucking around thing, drinking and all this kind of stuff it's not going to go well for you. And you were the only, I think, person in comedy who ever took the time to say that to me. And it resonated. And in fact, I found prior to this week, the last correspondence we had was in 2011, and I sent you, after my second audition for the Second City Conservatory, I sent you a panicked message, and I said, Tim, I hope you're doing well. I just got my second email saying I, for the second time, didn't get the conservatory, and I was wondering if you give me some notes, things I can work on over the next 8 weeks so I can go in and nail it and get the conservatory. To which your response was, Sam, you have to bring out your total personality in the next audition. The new artistic director was there, and he's coming down hard on the auditioners, trying to shine and stand out. So any work you can do, physical, emotional, stretching yourself, be prepared, don't give up. You've got this. Don't try to do more than you need to.
That was nice.
No, it absolutely was. I'm sorry I couldn't have had fulfilled it.
Oh, on your behalf, I'm going to tell you, I remember what I remember of you, that you were really fun, really goofy, and you stood out as someone who loved to have fun on stage. You're kind of serious now. But for the readers at home or the watchers at home, Sam was goofy, young, round-headed, like nutsoid, kind of fun on stage. He was really like a fun character actor.
I really appreciate that, and we can get into it in a minute. But is there anything harder? Because I know you've gone through this. Well, first of all, I want to ask you. You took a class with, I believe it was Julie Morgan, who was on the main stage with Belushi.
Judy
Morgan. For you, was that kind of the same feeling that I had going into a classroom with a guy that was on the main stage with Farley?
Well, no, because we were, told, to start at a players' workshop at the Second City, run by Josephine Forsberg, and she had a little loft space over right next to the Deja Vu bar, and right next door and upstairs. And it said, before you take any classes, you should take some beginning classes over there and get your feet wet. And so I landed in that class, knowing like little or nothing about Second City, and my friend David Pesquazi was in the same class with me, and that's where we met 40 years ago. And we didn't know, Judy wasn't a boaster, but we came to find out that she was in the cast with John Belushi. And she was, like I said, she wasn't a big boaster, and she taught us like basic tenets of like how to get through, a scene with somebody else, and how to have some fun. but she also told me, she was like, you guys, you guys are good, and you should go study with Dell. You should go try to get into Dell's class. And so she guided me. David says he doesn't remember this, but I remember her telling us both. But to go, go try to get into Dell's class. So I had a friend that was in that class. I told the story in another podcast that I sat on the bench and watched, and it was $10 a class. And I got into class finally when I brought a bag of mushrooms and slipped them to the guy that collected the money. And then suddenly Dell was like, O'Malley is in.
I don't know if that would have worked for me in your class. I mean, it's just so interesting. What I was going to ask you is, as a performer, is there a bigger enemy other than your own expectations that you build up in your mind when you're trying to make it?
Well, at the time, I wasn't trying to do anything, because I was trying to be a student, and it came pretty quick to me that I didn't know anything because someone said, I don't know if it was Dell or someone in the class, because it was like a hand-picked audition for the class only type group, and that said, being funny at parties is for your friends is not the same as learning how to perform for an audience. It's completely a different thing. And even if you're funny with and made your friends laugh with stories and characters when you were growing up, that it was completely different, And so I got humbled and just kind of watched and, got my teeth kicked in when I tried to make a joke.
Oh no, I know how that goes. So you study there for a minute. Before you know it, you make the touring company.
Yeah, I got into. He said, you want to get hired? Go to Donnie's class. Donnie DePolo, great guy, kind of a legend at Second City that nobody knows about, but he created the dubbings, all the dubbings that were done by SCTV. There's some there's a movie, there's a dubbing of The Hustler, the movie, the takeoff on the movie The Hustler that he created with John Candy, and they all did their own dubbings. And anyway, Donnie was fantastic, and he mentored me. He pulled me aside. He said, "You're good. I'm going to teach you how to get hired by Second City." And he taught me a bunch of little side tricks about politicking, which I knew nothing about.
And boy, that was a key that I learned at my time at Second City. Meanwhile, I was doing politics. I was great at just politics. It was the politics of the theater that I was shit at. But to back up just a second, who were the guys that made you want to be a performer or made you want to be funny on stage, or the women when you're growing up? Like what was that era, or the folks that stood out?
Well, in the 70s in college, we all gathered at somebody's house with a keg on Saturday night, and we watched the original cast, and I adored Dan Aykroyd. I thought his range of characters and his directness and the way he could articulate so quickly verbally, and just how sharp he was. And it was like I thought he was amazing, and I held him up high.
I think today's his birthday, actually.
What?
Yeah, today's Aykroyd's birthday. It's a very bittersweet day. We're having this conversation with Alan Arkin passed yesterday, and then today's
Yeah.
Aykroyd's birthday.
Yeah, Alan Arkin was a great guy. He was an old toughie friend of Fred Kaz, who played piano for the main stage for most of his life. And they were best buds. And Alan Arkin he was a serious actor, from the get-go. If you look at original video on YouTube of his scenes, he was, he played it pretty straight. His humor was super subtle, and I just, my favorite movie of his was Wait Till Dark, because he played 3 or 4 different characters in the same movie. And, I don't want to compare him to other actors that do the same thing, but he knocked me over when he pulled that off because I didn't know he was playing several different people in the same film.
Really, first time you saw it, you were going like, "Wait, who's that?"
Exactly. Like they had the audience completely bamboozled by his range of characters. He played 3 or 4 different people.
As opposed to when you see Eddie Murphy and you know everybody's Eddie Murphy.
Yeah, as opposed to where it's very clear,
Right.
And like in Peter Sellers, you're completely you're aware that it's Peter
You're in
Sellers.
on it. Yeah, right.
But Alan Arkin changed his appearance, and he was just fantastic.
And I heard
So
you say
Dan
something.
Aykroyd was my first, and I loved Lorraine Newman. I don't know why, but I thought she was like just golden. And everyone loved Gilda, everybody loved John, everybody loved Bill Murray, but I thought Lorraine was an unsung, sharp as a tack player.
Right. I know my first memories of Dan Aykroyd are with Ghostbusters as a kid. And that had a huge resonance to me where I remember at one point, maybe kindergarten school photos, I was telling my mom to do my hair like Ray Stantz from the Ghostbusters. So I was an Aykroyd guy myself. Um,
Steve Martin was one of my favorite stand-ups. I had all his records.
I mean, was anybody? Do you think that's so interesting that you bring that up? Tara, my partner, she usually co-hosts this with me. We were talking about the other day. Was anybody ever as big as Steve Martin was at his height of stand-up? I mean, he was a fucking rock star.
He was, and before Andy Kaufman was taking people places, he would Steve Martin would take the whole audience to McDonald's and have them stand in line and order one order of French fries, one at a time, and then like Wild and Crazy Guy, at the
The
same
album.
time they brought him into Saturday Night Live, and every time he was on, he's doing amazing sketches like that dance number with
Oh,
Gilda,
oh,
which is absolutely beautiful. And then King Tut, he created so many like legendary sketches on that show. He should have been a cast member, but he probably wanted to keep his stand up.
he might have been too big to be a cast member.
Yeah,
It's really interesting. Yeah, King Tut gets quoted around here pretty often. It's just jams. It's still jams. What so I mean it was like the heyday. It was there was very exciting stuff going on in comedy.
yeah, it
It
was amazing.
it seemed like it was also Brave New World a little bit.
Yeah, he was. And when I got a chance to meet him later on, uh, a friend of mine was doing a movie with him, and he took us out to lunch. And the guy was like, "I'm so jealous of you guys because you know how to improvise with other people, and I always struggled with that. I need a script, I needed Aykroyd, and I needed who were the 3 wild and crazy guys? It was
It
Aykroyd,
was Aykroyd, Steve Martin, and then occasionally Garrett Morris.
Garrett Morris." He said, "I need a script, but you guys know how to improvise." And he gave kudos to us. He was so nice. And then he was just complimentary and very down to earth and very just really great guy and made you feel like an equal.
And that's
Even though we were all, and even though we're all at Second City, in touring companies and stuff, we're on main stage and stuff, and he was like, he was fantastic.
well, for the folks who don't know, when after touring company and you were on main stage, you were in a cast that was utterly stacked. It was yourself and
Owen,
Bob Odenkirk. Some people might have heard of him.
Tim Meadows.
Tim Meadows and the late Chris Farley, and then I think I know the name of the at least one of the who were the female cast members out of the 2 or 3.
Jill Talley, who ended up on Mr. Show, and Holly Wortell, who she ended up in a movie with me with Bonnie Hunt, and and she's done tons of cameos, and she taught at Second City, LA for a long time.
Which I think just closed just recently. They announced they're closing.
Really? Didn't
I
know
think
that.
so. I know you've been out. I heard the podcast. I know there's new ownership within the program, and it was very interesting to hear your take because it's kind of the way I felt about it when I went to Chicago last summer. I went and took a look at the place, and now there's when I was there and I was going to your class, you didn't walk in like repping Ghostbusters or Trading Places or any of that bullshit. And now they've got the posters up all over the walls, and I know you've been out of Second City for a couple years, but I loved what you said as far as it's an alma mater, it's a program you've been a lifelong part of for the most part, and you wouldn't be critiquing changes if you didn't love the institution.
Exactly. And Joe, who I was doing that podcast with, was the same way. We were both kind of, just because talking about because we love it, And,
Yeah, I mean it's like I don't bitch about the Lakers offseason moves because I don't love the Lakers, right? Like I mean and we're in the full middle of that right now. So you're what was the chemistry like on that main stage cast that we just mentioned? Like did everybody know they were kind of a heavy hitter? I mean, and
no,
to your credit, you were because I've gone back and I've seen stuff and I've talked to folks, uh, uh, you know, because you're not a household name by no means. Were you not a guy just hitting home runs and driving in runs?
yeah, we didn't know we didn't think we were heavy hitters. We knew we had good chemistry. Joel Murray was part of the cast, and I was lucky enough to get his seat when he went and started getting TV shows. And he's had a lifelong success rate of television programs as well as movies. And Joel had a super connection to all the guys, but I was understudies, and I sat in on all the improv sets, and I actually rehearsed, the two previous shows because I was his understudy, and we just had a blast. When they brought Bob in, there was a little ruffled feathers because
Was he a little bit younger than everybody?
Huh?
Was he a little bit younger than everybody? Is that kind of what caused kind of the friction a little bit?
No, the friction was that he hadn't climbed the ladder, and we thought, in our naive minds, that life was fair and you worked your way up, and you did all your politicking. You didn't just get brought in. And the director at the time directed him in a show across town and loved him and brought him over, and we knew him as this comedy nerd. Bob would sit at the Comedy Showcase, a place that most of us played before we got hired, and he would sit on a bench and he would take notes, tons of notes, and sit on a bench and ask could he do his stand-up almost every Saturday. And then once in a while, the guy, Jim Shea, who ran the place, would let him get up there, and he would do those oddball things that he did later on, like read the little messages on the bottom of Bazooka Comics.
Yeah, the Mr. Show stuff, pretty much.
Yes, and so some of us thought he was a comedy nerd, and also had a little beef with the fact that he was being brought in,
They kind of
without audition, without going through any the hoops or anything. But he turned out to be very gracious. And when I went, I've been sober for 27 years, and when I went to do my amends with him, he's like, Tim, you weren't that bad, I said, because we made it hard for you. He's like, not at all. He's like, he was just very gracious. He goes, I loved working with you guys, and you guys were always good to me, and you make yourself out like you were beating on me every night, but you were not. I was super independent. I wanted to kind of stand out as a stand-up in the middle of a ensemble show, but he was an integral part of like propping up and writing what's it called? Living in a van down by the river.
Yeah,
Matt,
motivational speaker. Yeah, Matt Foley.
yeah, he was crucial in creating that for Chris, and then he went on to Saturday Night Live with Chris and was crucial in pulling those characters so that because
Bringing
Chris
it.
was floundering in the beginning of Saturday Night Live, and Bob said, let's pull a character from Second City, and then that was the beginning. But before that, Chris did a bunch of characters that didn't work very well, and then later on, Bob was crafting like the female character that he played, and several other characters that Chris played. He was devastated, like just emotionally, and so was Tim Meadows because they both loved and helped Chris so much, and so Bob turned out to be a big heavy hitter, as we know, because he helped create those shows that he's in. Tim, Jill was one of the funniest women I ever. Holly was one of the funniest women I ever worked with. Um, David, of course, has been my lifelong friend and improv, partner
I mean,
slash adversary because we're always button heads. Like if we talked about theory, it would just be two different people.
right. And for folks that don't know, Dave is part of maybe the most beloved improv team in history as far as two-man, TJ and Dave.
Right. And I always say the marriage of TJ to Dave just it changed Dave to a softer, just
Really?
more characters. He played women more. He played lower status. Like Dave said to me once when we were going to an audition, he's like, "I will never play low status to you, so don't even try."
I mean, that sounds like the balls. Like
We were friends though, and he had ideas, and
isn't that's that expectation thing of like, I'm not playing that to you. Like, that's not who I am, as opposed to let's figure it out. Was there anybody on that cast necessarily that you definitely felt a rival with? Like as far as like creatively, competitively? Or were you
not
guys all
really.
pretty much in it? It was all just team.
I mean, at that beginning, not until I was getting, more and more into my addiction did I get competitive, or I say not competitive, just worried about my position because I wasn't producing enough. I had this stupid resentment, like all the best people were gone after a lot of those guys left. And like Ron West came to my aid on my last show, and he said, "Tim, you got nothing in the show, and they're going to fire you." And he helped me write a scene. And I love Ron for doing that, pulling me aside. And when they let me go, they were like, "Tim, you're a mess. You don't like anybody you're working with, and we're going to let you go." And I completely understood. It was the kindest firing that anyone could go to. They were
But
like, "You're not."
for folks who don't realize who are watching this, or so, like you said, scoring at home, uh, anybody who knows me personally, or just in passing, probably knows that I would have been a insane, resentful fucking asshole if 3 out of the 4 of us had got SNL, and I'm still in the neighborhood.
Yeah, that was me.
I mean, I get it. I mean, I can't imagine the feeling. And you said at one point, I think I heard you say that you were at a lunch or something and with Lorne, and he said send some sketches, and and it was to the point this definitely hit a tone with me, and resonated with me to where you were so fucking pissed off. You were like, what? Why fucking bother?
Bonnie Hunt was so kind, and she had so many connections. And I think she even turned down Saturday Night Live because she had an idea of what she wanted to be and what she wanted to do. But she set up a lunch across the street, and Lauren was there, and he said, we're not going to hire you. Sorry about that. I don't think they ever apologize to anyone that doesn't get a job in
I've
show
never heard
business.
that story. I'm a huge SNL nerd, you know that, and I've never heard of Lauren having that conversation with anybody.
Yeah, and it was so nice of him. And then he said, if you ever want to throw us some sketches, you rated really high on all the scorecards, because back then they'd send groups of people to watch the show, and you'd get scored. And one guy was really, Mike Schumacher was a great guy, who was in casting. And he kept whispering to me, he's like, "You're scoring higher than everybody else, Tim. You're a shoo-in." And I was getting so pumped up. And then they settled on Tim and Chris. And anyway, Lauren actually did say that to me, and I was like, I don't want to be a writer. I want to be on TV. I want to. And it was that naivete. I want to be a star. I had no idea that I could have probably weaseled my way into a sketch. I had no idea. I was just
run for a season, and the next thing you know, you're featured player, whatever.
Yeah, who knows? But I was so full of myself at the time, and full of pride and ego, that it was just like, thanks a lot, appreciate it, and not even appreciating the fact that he's talking to me personally. Of course, I'm thinking I'm entitled to that apology.
Right, right.
I was a total egomaniac.
Yeah, I can't imagine. I can, but not sitting across from Lauren Michaels at Corcoran's or wherever you were, or at Old Town Ale House or whatever. The rumor, the old legend is in an era in which everybody remembers Farley for being so fucking wild and crazy, that the fact of the matter is you were the wild and crazy guy on that cast.
Oh, well, I don't want to badmouth Chris, but he was pretty. I was mentioning it to him in the bathroom. I'm like, you can't guzzle a full gallon of Gallo wine and snort a gram of Coke when you get to Saturday Night Live. He'd already been hired, and I was like, and he fluffed me off, and I was saying, Chris, you can't do this, but yeah, I was coming in, to work. And I was told a couple times, you look like crap. You shouldn't even be here today. And
you guys shows what, 6 nights a week at that point?
We were 8 shows a week, Tuesday through Sunday. 2 on Saturday, 2 on Friday. So 8 shows a week, 6 days a week. Yeah,
that's a lot. And that's a lot for anybody.
And at the end, I was pretty messed up, but I always thought I kept it together, and when it was bad, someone would pull me aside and say, you were a mess out there. You forgot your lines or something like that.
How much?
But like a good alcoholic, I'll say I never fell off the stage and I never puked on the stage. I always thought I never drank before a show. But the truth was, it takes an hour to detox every ounce of alcohol you ever take in. So legally, you're blasted if you have 20 beers from the night before, because it's still in your system. So I was drunk all the time.
Yeah.
So I'm super grateful that I got fired, because it ended up bringing me to my bottom, and I got sober, and then I wrote GODSHOW. And I got all my
hit, an enormous hit, but then you stuck around on the main stage for a little bit after those guys left, after that your cast kind of took off, and then you end up with this new guy who I'm sure at first you weren't interested in working with, named Steve Carell.
I thought Steve was super talented
off the bat, or did it take a minute?
I thought he was super talented, and I was threatened by how talented he was. And Dave Brzezowski was super talented, and he was slated to move in. And I was threatened by Dave's talent, and being insecure. yeah, I didn't dislike them, and I loved playing with them, and I never showed any animosity while I was playing with them. But I definitely felt I was in competition. It never showed in sketches, um, because there's just no room for it. But in the back of my mind, I'm worried about my job.
Right. Right.
But I'd worked with Steve in one of my first shows out at Second City Northwest, and he was funny as hell, and he was innovative. He was goofy. He was big into fluids. One of my big stories is he'd fill his mouth with Pepto Bismol. He'd come into a scene. We ask him to keep an eye on the door, and if we need an out, come on in. And you never know what he would do, and he fills his mouth with Pepto Bismol, walks in, opens his mouth, and goes blah, and spills Pepto Bismol all over his suit, kills and leaves. And then I don't know if he invented this, but Steve would put Vaseline on his glasses and then dip them in baby powder and come in just all whited out with a big dumb smile on his face. And I say to this day, I may have seen something since, but I don't know if he's ever been as funny as he was at Second City. Some people say some of the movies that he's done, and I haven't seen all of them. He's done it been as goofy and as out there,
Irreverent and just wild. Yeah, yeah, just silly.
And Rosowski is currently one of the gurus of improvisation. Period.
Yeah, and are you teaching anywhere these days?
I'm not. I mean, I taught on Zoom for some private groups, and I'm still teaching a couple of private groups of adults that just want to play, that don't have any ambitions to be actors. So yeah, I'm currently running a couple of small private improv groups that have that motive of they love the tenets of improv and how it brought them together and made them into a group, and how close they feel to each other now.
Which is one of the coolest things about when you're in your own little Second City group, at whatever level it is. I always found the family aspect of it, or the family vibe of it, when everybody's clicking, and I think I probably learned this from you, but when everybody's trusting each other.
It's what Martin DeMott told me what classes were all about. When I first started teaching, I was newly sober, and I was still angry and thought I knew everything. And he was like, will you take it easy on them? All these people aren't here to be stars. He goes, they're really here. They're going to make a bond, and they're going to be friends for life. And your job is to show them kindness and love. And he dripped on me like a stone, and I softened up. And to Martin DeMott's credit, I became a teacher because of him. And before that, I was just barking orders and telling people you suck and stuff like that.
I'm glad I missed that era. I've got to say, it's talking about friends for life. A female in my graduating group in your class, Kim Scott. I was going through a really ugly divorce, and my younger brother was getting married, and I just went through a crazy upended divorce, and of course none of it had anything to do with me, so don't worry about that. It's a crazy story, but I told Kim Scott about it, and she literally goes, I'm flying down to Austin. I'm going to be your date to your brother's wedding. Who wow. More or less the strongest female lead in that group that we had in your class.
Wow.
So that's a testament.
I was down in Austin before I got hired for my first comedy group, and I was hanging out at Esther's Follies.
Yeah.
And at the time, the founders were doing parodies of classical music and opera, and they were just so high end.
It was what it. I mean,
I know it's changed a lot, and I know it's not the same, but the founders, their names are escaping me right now. At one point, they let a horse in one door. It was facing 6th Street. They let a horse in one door. The guy got on the horse and galloped out the other door, and you could watch him gallop up the street at the end of the piece.
So wait,
And
so how long did you live in Austin?
so I was there for like 3 months doing like promotions for RJ Reynolds, but I just hung out at the nightclubs, and I at the time I was singing and doing stand up, and so I ended up hanging out with the cast members at Esther's Follies and like crazy, like going to parties at Stevie Ray Vaughan's house without knowing who he was
I
or knowing who the Thunderbirds were,
Jimmy Vaughn, who's still around, going strong.
and met like Chris. What was Christopher Cross? He
Yeah.
was recording an album there, and Robin Williams came through in
Really?
some blurry blackout of mine. Yeah.
well, man, that's wild. I got very close to auditioning for Esther's Follies a couple times before I came to Second City. So my origin story before we met was I was on a shock jock radio out of high school as an intern,
Nice.
and I was very. I'd been doing stand up, and then my first day that I go in to do my on air interview, a comic who saw my first ever open mic at the big comedy club knew me, and it was clear that he knew me, and he kind of had my back to the crew of the morning show. So he made me an intern, and then I'm down to do anything, and it's whatever it takes. It's very much that Belushi and Farley mentality that doesn't always work out, and over the top, all the stuff that you told me not to do for that conservatory audition, and and our claim to fame was we beat Howard Stern in his last year in the ratings before he went to Sirius. But that is a very different form of art, if you can even call it that, than the masterwork you do creating a scene on stage in Chicago.
But they were amazing people. Michael and Shannon were their first that ran it, and Joel and Ethan Cohen were making Blood Simple.
Oh my Lord! Yeah.
At the same time, and they cast several people from Esther's. They even hired this kind of old sidekick kind of guy that took tickets at the door. Can't remember his name, but he used to be a clown for Ringling Brothers, Barnum and Bailey, and he was sitting at the door at Esther's Follies. And I remember going, I wonder who, I didn't know who Joel and Ethan Cohen, and I didn't know anything about them. And
yeah, nobody knew him, right? Nobody knew him at that point.
And they're in my list of top movies.
All right, let's get after it. I'm not. We've done the history. Let's get into this. Let's get into some films. It's Saturday morning. By the way, I'm gonna reiterate, folks, how flattered I am that Tim was so ready to do this, to have fun with me this morning, that he was like, "Hey, I'm awake. Let's go, dude. Put on some deodorant. Come
I was looking forward to it.
Get some spring water, whatever you got to do. Get your seltzer. Let's do this. All right, let's go through some movies. Are we doing this by category? Are we doing this by just favorites?
I'm jumping around, and I'm gonna see what you think, and if you have ideas or if anything. So I start with classics. Like my favorite of all time is Cool Hand Luke.
That's your all-time favorite?
Yeah.
Hard to beat.
And I saw it when I was in Catholic grammar school. They showed it to us because it had so much religious undertones to it. But I didn't really recognize any of those. I just related to the underdog, that
the badass.
Yeah, the underdog that gets beat, anti-hero that gets beat down, and he keeps getting back up. George Kennedy, was that his name?
Yeah, was it George Kennedy or Ned Beatty?
George Kennedy, and he won the Oscar for Best Supporting.
He did for that movie?
Yes.
Wow.
Oh, Luke. And
he was the one helping chew the eggs.
Yeah, he was. You eat them damn eggs, Luke. Just eat them. No.
As a kid, I don't know if you thought the same thing, but as a kid, I after I saw that movie for the first time at like 12, probably, I was going, my folks are a little bit younger than Tara's folks. It's Tara's old man was he's not with us anymore, but he was a Lakota Native American, and
Wow.
and he said that was the first movie that made him like relate to a white man.
Nice.
And just that's just like the being kicked down and kicked down and kicked down. But I think what I was getting at was I think it crossed everybody's mind if you're a little boy seeing that movie going, I think I can crush 50 boiled eggs. Give me a shot. I think I can. I'll put up 45.
It's one of the only movies, and I never liked guys that knew every word of a comedy film or any film, but it's one of the only movies where I think I know every line. Yeah. And I also love classic soundtracks. And Lalo Schifrin was the music creator. Stuart Rosenberg, he only made like 2 movies, but he rocked it with Cool Hand Luke. Next on the list for top movie is another Paul Newman. It's The Hustler. Jackie Gleason and Paul Newman, George C. Scott.
Minnesota Fats.
Yeah, and another classic soundtrack by a jazz great called Kenyon Hopkins, and another underdog movie. So
and then the Color of Money is kind of a low key spiritual sequel.
It is, but it's nothing.
It doesn't come close.
It doesn't. No, it does. Why they didn't do it in black and white or try to get something going that I think Paul just did it as an exercise.
Before we get off The Hustler, I got to ask you. The story has resurfaced lately with all the UAP and the UFO stuff, and Tara and I are usually down to eat an edible and hear these theories. Jackie Gleason mouths off about UFOs, and Nixon takes him to a base and shows them to him. Have you heard that?
In real life, he did this?
This is the story that's in Jackie Gleason's widow's book. Is that Dick Nixon and Jackie Gleason are hanging out.
Oh my gosh!
And he says something like, "Can you imagine seeing one?" And Richard Nixon's going, "Well, I can get in the car, but we'll never know, I guess."
No, never heard it. Didn't know it. Then I'll jump to classic comedy. For me, because I'm not really into a lot of comedy, so like these offbeat ones. George C. Scott starred in something called The Flim Flam Man.
I've heard of it. I've never seen it. I always think of him as Patton.
Yeah, and this is a simple, small movie, and the soundtrack I think is Lalo Schifrin again, but Jerry Goldsmith, and him and Michael Sarrazin, an actor, did a few movies and then got out of movies, and Sue Ann Lyons, I think is her name. She played Lolita.
Who is the Tim, for the folks and me included? What the fuck on earth does the Flim Flam Man do? What is
he's a con man?
Okay, it's like Rickles back in all the old sitcoms.
He's a con man, and Michael Sarrazin's just trying to get away from the army. Another underdog kind of movie, trying to escape, and then I jump on to comedies because recently I found on Amazon Ghost World with Steve.
Great flick.
You know it.
Great flick.
Yeah, with what's her name?
I think Greg Kinnear's in it. Right?
Scarlett Johansson. What's her name? Theta.
It's just,
I wrote it down.
I think it's just such a cool original concept.
It is.
And it's they're walking around, and is Gervais in that, or is it just Greg Kinnear? I want to think Ricky
in
Gervais.
Ghost World.
Yeah.
Who'd you say first? Neither of those guys, I think, are in.
Neither of those guys. I'm talking about a completely different.
Buscemi. Steve Buscemi.
That's right. That's right.
So that's
a deep track.
Yeah. So for comedy, I gotta. Like people are like, "Don't you love this?" And all that. I'm like, "No, I love offbeat and stuff that stands the test of time." Uh,
Buscemi, Brad Renfro, Elena Douglas, who's been around, I mean, in everything. Thora Birch.
Thora Birch and Scarlett Johansson
Yeah,
when they were about 17 or 16.
right.
Uh, Jumping into the future, I mean, there's a unsung great story of Bonnie and Clyde that Kevin Costner did called Highwaymen.
Yes,
And you,
with Woody Harrelson.
with Woody Harrelson. And it's a great film, and it got shitty reviews, but the soundtrack is fantastic. The story is the way it's shot.
I
It's
loved
just,
it. I loved it. To me, you know what it felt like to me? It felt like True Detective going after Bonnie and Clyde.
yeah, exactly. And True Detective is another one of my favorites.
Oh man, I mean those 8 episodes with Woody Harrelson and McConaughey. That's hard. I mean, that's the best 8 hour movie when it comes to cop movies.
Coen Brothers is No Country for Old Men, Oh Brother Wherefore Art Thou, and Raising Arizona.
Oh yeah, Raising Arizona, ultimate classic. I rue the day that someone's going to try to inevitably remake or reboot Raising Arizona.
I would say Lebowski, but everybody would jump on that bandwagon.
Yeah, everybody thinks Lebowski's the thing. I had somebody on the podcast the other day tell me over and over, like, cut me off during the podcast. You should play young Lebowski, and I was like, but I'm the dude. Like, drop it. I love that Bill Murray gets pitched Garfield, and it's a man named Eaton Cohen, and he assumed it was a Coen Brothers Garfield movie and signs on for 2.
Oh no, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so he ended up doing the voice for 2 Garfield movies, thinking when he signed on that it was the Coen Brothers. But they're geniuses.
I'll wrap it up real quick. Wrap it up with Jake Gyllenhaal in Source Code, in End of Watch.
I know, like Source Code, because you're taking the L from the south side to the north side.
Right. And that's a beautiful movie, and I can't remember the co-star. She's fantastic. And a movie he did all by himself called The Guilty, where he's just a 911 operator.
He's done so many cool little roles like that, just like that. He did one like that where he was the paparazzi guy.
Yes, Nightcrawler.
Yes, he is a very underrated, willing to push it. Tim, in another life, were you not full on Pacino, Dustin Hoffman level crazy method actor? I mean, I was when we were getting ready to jump on this call, I was like, I can't wait to ask Tim what makes him laugh. And it turns out what entertains you is just great cinema.
Yeah, I mean, when I got a chance to go near Dustin Hoffman, he kind of just ducked into a car and didn't want to talk to anybody. But I met a character actor from Chicago. I can't remember his name, but he was leaning up against the wall with an Irish cap tilted down. He's like, kid, you want to make any money in this business, you got to let those guys get in the car, and we just stand by the sides, but we get jobs. And when he was Death of a Salesman at the Auditorium Theater with Malkovich and Dustin Hoffman.
Wow, fuck.
And you couldn't get near those guys, but this guy, great guy, you'd recognize him from a bunch of films. But I loved that, and I still do. And I said underdog like a million times, but and when I did Bonnie Hunt's movie Return to Me, the old guys that were sitting around the table with Carol O'Connor, they said what you wanted to be as a character actor. That way people don't bother you at restaurants.
That may not be the case anymore, but I think there was a time in history where it definitely was. Streaming might have screwed that up for those corner tables. Yeah. But it's so funny, when I was in your class, I was hell bent, and the only thing I wanted to be was, the fat loud guy. And the older I get, the more I could not be less interested in that and want to do character acting. And I got a few roles. I played a handful of random shit on Walker on the CW, and I had I had a small part. I was seen on that, and put into an HBO limited series called Love and Death.
Nice.
Yeah, and I'm silent the whole time, but I took it seriously, and then the writer's strike hit, so now I'm at home watching George C. Scott movies.
Yeah, I just fell in love with character actors, but I like to play stuff close to myself. And whenever someone pitches something to me, if it, people always say, "I can't believe you turned shit down," but
Really?
but I mean, somebody offered me a film years ago, but it was like I had to go around bashing people's heads in, and he was a maniac. It was just he kills like everybody in the cast, And at the time,
And then you're that guy.
well, at the time, I was like, I just didn't. I liked the script and I liked the guys trying to do it. And they came to GODSHOW and they were like, "We want you to be the star of this movie." And I was super flattered. And I said, "I'll play a part, but I don't want to play the lead. And I can help you cast the lead." And I got the guy for them to play the lead. It never saw the light of day. You can buy it on Amazon. I can't remember. Forgetting the title. I want to say Dark Days, but that's a documentary about living in the subways of New York. But anyway, long story short, I would turn stuff down that just seemed like it was just out of my wheelhouse at the time.
Right. And don't you think there's a place, maybe? I don't try to lead the witness here, but there's a fine line between character actors who can do it for a real long time, and then the character actors who kind of inevitably become like a caricature of themselves.
Yes.
And it's from like here to here, like it's so close.
Yeah, and not really a caricature, just a little expanded version of themselves, like an on-camera version,
And you go like, "Hey, do that thing you did in the last one."
Right, and people pitch me stuff all the time and ask for podcasts and stuff, but it was like Sam. Immediately, I love Sam, and he's funny, and we're gonna have fun. And so I was really happy to be here. I do want to plug GODSHOW because people can still watch it online. It's a story of my getting sober. I get to beef about in that play. I was still angry enough to beef about like who got hired for Saturday Night Live and me not getting it, but then like all the great things that happened to me after I got sober, which was like my first movie and David Letterman quoting my line to Bonnie Hunt like on TV when I was sitting home alone, and all of a sudden he goes, "I like the guy that says, 'I don't touch men, Ralph.'" And I'm like, holy crap. Wait, I'm waiting for Bonnie to say my name, and then she doesn't. But she called me, she goes, "I said your name, but it was during the commercial." And I told an old priest that I knew about that, and he goes, "Yep, God didn't want your name on national television because your head wouldn't fit in this fucking church, Tim."
For folks who watching right now, GODSHOW, I watched it last night. I don't know if this is the version you want to point people to, but there's a version on YouTube that you can watch the entirety of.
Yeah, that's the one. It's called God. If you Google GODSHOW and the
Tim
word
O'Malley.
full, Tim O'Malley or GODSHOW Full FULL.
I mean the just the driving around Chicago, driving around
in my underwear looking for crack.
I mean, that just made me feel at home based on who I worked for in the morning radio shows.
Norm Hawley like crafted and moved the time pieces in there, all the little stories. He'd moved them around in such a way. Ruby Streak wrote incredible music and lyrics with me for the songs, and it was the time of my life. I mean, I was sober and I had a hit show, and and I wasn't rich and I wasn't famous, but
But you were doing it.
People stop me on the street, and you're like, "You're the GODSHOW guy," and I was happy.
I mean, it reeks of it when you see clips. I watched a couple of old WGN news clips of them coming to the show, and it's very clear you're a very content performer working on that show. And here's where my pitch is. Would you ever be open for that becoming a film?
Well, I actually wrote a screenplay for it, and then I kind of fell in the cracks when I, started trying to make connections, and people saying, "Oh, it's impossible." I connected with a kind of a big wig that used to work at Second City, and he's like, that'll never happen. And it wasn't. I listened to it, to it. I did get disheartened a little bit, but I have a screenplay for it, and I'd be open to like trying to do something. But
Well,
the
I
one
would
thing I always say about doing GODSHOW again is I don't have that visceral fucking anger that I had when I first got sober still. I mean,
right.
it took me several years to detox that. And what drives the fucking show is me getting red-faced angry at God and the sky and cussing out,
Well,
students.
I mean, between the Trump stuff going on right now and the writer's strike, I might know a young actor with that anger who may be able to read for it.
Wonderful.
Also, with
Can we edit that guy's name out that you just said?
did I say anybody's name?
Yeah, you said a former president.
Oh, that guy. You mean that guy? Oh, yeah. Does that now? You grew up on the south side of Chicago. I didn't want to get into this, but now I think we have to. Why?
Oh no.
No, we're not going to.
Oh no, we can't.
I just want to ask you. You grew up in the era where people got fucking loud enough that Richard Nixon quit his job.
Yes.
Richard Nixon said, "This shit is too much. I'm not doing this. These people they have made their point." And
my girlfriend calls it the new hellscape.
She's doing the scape a favor by just calling it hell, I think. Because I think
everything's upside down and backwards.
My generation right now is doing this on their own stuff, on their own TikTok, and we just
right.
Okay.
And the sticking rich are getting off, horrible crimes. But on a lighter note,
is that Jack Parr? I don't have my glasses.
I don't know. I grew up on Johnny Carson, but Jack Parr always seemed to be like super overly sensitive, wonderful, kind man.
Yeah, no business in late night.
Was on the verge of nervous breakdown at any moment. Steve Allen was a funny fucking late night host.
Was he hardcore? He's way before my time.
He was. I only saw it like a little bit when I was growing up, catching it. But he was smack, how's your bird? He was like Letterman, where he would just shout out shit and ducks would drop down.
Jokes that you had to like be in on.
He was nuts. He like put on a hat and do news, and it was good. It was like a morning kid show for adults.
Well, here's the kind of psychopath kid I was. I had bad parents who let me stay up and watch Letterman as a young child, and I'm like 6 years old, and I'm staying with my aunt and uncle in very, very, very rural West Texas, and it's time for bed. And hey, all right, Sam, let's go ahead and get ready for bed. And I literally have to go like, hey guys, I go to bed after Johnny's monologue. Okay, so if you need a snack or whatever you got to do to power yourself up to carry me to the back bedroom, do it now because I'm here for the monologue. Last night I was doing for Tara. I don't know how this came up, but it was Carson finding out that Ed McMahon had been in like 4chan gay porn.
Oh, that's not true.
No. It was a bit we were doing around the house. Ed, is there? Have you heard of said homosexual deep web pornography? I have, John. Ed, have you? Yes. Ed, have you participated? I might have, King.
You are correct, sir. Who did that wonderful impression of?
It was Phil Hartman, right?
You are correct, sir. Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Oh my God! I wish I had met that guy.
I think late night. Would you say we're in a crazy changing landscape of film and TV and comedy right now? Do you think? I don't think late night. Mother idiot Slade. Late night's never going to be what it once was. And I think even Conan leaving is a big sign of like.
Yeah, Conan. I think Conan was my last favorite.
Was he the last?
Yeah, and I don't have a television. I just watch shit on streaming. So.
And I think that's what we all do. And now there's now there's new movies coming out that are good films, but they don't make the box office that movies would have made pre-COVID, so they're automatically called flops. And you're like, guys, this isn't going to end anywhere, like anywhere we want it to end. And then
Well, I know where the writers stand, and now the actors are about to join them because, without getting into super politics, they just never matched the pay for streaming. Just the idea of like getting paid per view. That's it.
I mean,
Give me a nickel for every time it's shown. I get a nice check still from Return to Me, but if I got paid for how many times it's played, online,
it's a nice little
a
brunch,
bit bigger.
right?
Yeah, and the writers deserve it,
No,
And,
they definitely do, and it's
people call them spoiled brats. I'm like, no, they got gypped on these contracts, so.
And it is mind blowing to me, Tim, that they that the streaming outlets won't, unlike Nielsen back in the day, or performing a live show where you can look and tell how many people are in the room or bought tickets.
Right.
They won't disclose how many people are clicking on these movies or on these shows.
Well, hopefully they'll get what they want and get what they need.
Well, I mean, as long as we
Or
don't
at least get a compromise.
with robot writers. I mean, the fact this is coming down to AI is mind blowing. I think who was it? Bill Maher had, I think, the best line about it was, how on earth are you going to find an AI program with that kind of childhood trauma?
It's true. That's what makes for good comedy.
All right, let's do some more movies before we got to wrap this up. I can talk to you all day.
So my what do you call it? My cheesecake. What do you call it when you indulge in
your dessert, your guilty pleasure, your
my junk food?
the junk,
My guilty pleasure,
your treat, late night snack.
True crime documentaries.
Let's go. Where do you want to start?
There's unbelievably, and people don't know this because it's kind of hidden, is that during the pandemic, Ron Howard and this guy Joe Bellinger, I think his name is, they did like Killing Fields of Texas and that crazy woman that had a guy strapped with a bomb out in front of a bank, and
the pizza guy bomb.
I think they produced that one. They did like that crazy hotel in LA where the woman got lost and disappeared and no one knows what happened to her.
The lady who got into the water.
The elevator.
That one terrifies me.
Yeah, I can't remember the name of the hotel, but it's the Cecil Hotel. And I'm not sure if they did all of those, but like
Tim, thanks for the plug. I know that they wanted the plug.
And like now they're spitting them out, and I'm watching like retreads on stories, but they're told from a different angle,
like a different production team, so you get a little.
Yeah, like they just released Crimes of the Century on HBO, and it rehashes Tim McVeigh and David Koresh and several other ones, but they're still, some of them just do it right because there's so many different documentaries on the same subjects, like the Ted Kaczynski Talks, the one where he does actual conversations with a woman in the jail, and then you hear recordings.
Really, I haven't heard that one.
That's on Netflix. And so is
and by the way, it was more or less was Ted Kaczynski's deal. I don't want to downplay it. He only killed 6 people. I think he gets put up there as a.
I'm with you.
I think they pump up his stats a little bit
because he lasted so long, and because he was such a different type of person.
Wasn't he just warning us about the internet?
If he didn't kill anybody, his manifesto would be taken. I don't know if it would be taken seriously because so many people want to quell that.
Well, who wants to read these days?
Yeah, as we can see in the current Supreme Court, shooting down
You're
stuff.
over here going, let's not get political, Sam, and now we're getting into notice rulings.
But
I got to ask
yeah,
you,
if
can
he
you go
did,
true
if he did,
crime? Have you yet to find? Because Tara has introduced me to true crime in a way in which I thought I knew, and she opened up a whole new level. Side note, we've had 12 bodies in the last 8 months wash up on Town Lake.
is that near Austin?
That's the river that runs right through downtown.
Wow.
And
There's a couple of theories about Austin serial killers that are dormant and have come back.
really, please, this is why
I just remember hearing in passing that there was a couple of series of things that were never solved. It's just in my crime bibliography, but I don't remember.
as the old detective who's too old for this shit.
Yeah, or just they call them cold case, but they just give up on a lot of them if there's nothing.
Favorite all-time
Bodies.
leader.
This is 12 bodies in the last how many weeks? Months?
No, last 9 months.
9 months.
And every time it's always a young man, always left the same area of bars, and then turns up dead, and then APD says, well, we know it's not a homicide.
The title of the podcast is "Let's Get Weird," isn't it?
Well, Weirdos at Home.
Weirdos at home. So it's okay if we just get nerdy as shit about.
Oh, yeah. And if you stay at home, you probably won't end up murdered in the lake.
But it's okay that we get nerdy and weird to weirdos at home talking about like.
I love Tim. I'm ecstatic at where this is going.
13 Lives. 13 Lives by Ron Howard.
Great.
The rescue story. That's fucking amazing film on Amazon.
I think Ron Howard has somehow found a way to be underrated as a director at this point in history.
Met him in the John at Second City. He was at one urinal. I was at the other. I just said, I love your fucking shit. And he goes, thanks, buddy. And he washed his hands and he turned around. He goes, Ron Howard. I said, Tim O'Malley. He goes, nice to meet you. And he walked out.
Wonderful.
I love those guys.
Wonderful.
I love guys that are just like, no problem. Meet somebody.
Cool.
Just there'd be nobody else in the bathroom. So it was just Ron Howard, wash his hands, shake my hand.
That's how I met your former colleague Tim Meadows outside of a CVS.
Kind.
The sweetest, but I was on a lot of cocaine.
Oh God, how many years ago?
I was like 25. I was like either just out of your class or still in your class. And and kind of turned real quick because I knew he'd been behind me. Hey, Tim Meadows. And Tim literally with his skateboard in hand goes, looks around, looks over my shoulder, assesses the situation, goes, I might be, it depends.
He was a guy, I don't want to tell of school, that could walk out of a room when there was a mirror full of cocaine and a bunch of us degenerates sitting around it. And he goes, I gotta go, because if I do one more, I'll never leave. And he was.
Some guys have that. I never had that.
And he was funny as hell, and he might have had addiction in his family and had the wherewithal to avoid it.
Wait, Tim. Speaking of that, what were your parents like?
My parents were 50s. Parents that had 11 children. By the time,
where are you in the lineup?
I'm number 10.
But number one in your heart.
Huh?
But number one in your heart.
Number one in my heart?
No, it's an old joke about sports. He's number 10 on the roster, but he's number one in your heart.
Oh, my mom said
it's fine.
You're my favorite on her deathbed. She said, don't tell anybody, but you're my favorite.
You fuck. Oh.
And I walked into a house recently, in the last 15 years, where someone said, we don't say the word favorites, and it's because it's dysfunctional. And I had no idea like that whole idea of like praising a child in front of other children and stuff like that is what causes that childhood trauma crap, which I'm still detoxing from and go to, 12-step programs for.
What did your folks do growing up?
My dad was a salesman. My mom was, carrying baskets of laundry up and down 3 flights of stairs and cooking dinner for a billion of us.
My Lord,
And
11 kids, man. Are you guys? This is
so,
south side of Chicago. This is like in the 50s. Was your dad old school Midwest salesman?
he sold pneumatic tools for a big company. Was a butt hair away from being named, head of sales, president of sales, and they hired what they called an efficiency expert. And it's downsizing in old-fashioned terms, and they shit canned up everybody that was 55 and under, or 55 and older, excuse me. And he was pissed, but he went out. He went out and got himself a.
Was your old man in World War II?
No, he was lucky enough to get deferments from World War II because of how many kids he had. Every time they raised the limit of how many kids you can have, it was his time to go up, and they'd be like, "Okay, the new limit is 6," and he'd have 6 kids, and he didn't do it on purpose, and he felt guilty when he hung out with his friends that did serve. And when he got a little blasted, he would cry and say, I felt like I didn't serve my country and I didn't do what you guys did. And but by the time, the way I was raised was there was cocktail parties and women in classic nylons and heels and dresses and lipstick in my living room, smoking and drinking. And I wanted to be one of those adults hanging out with those ladies.
And telling a funny story.
And sitting around the piano singing songs, because my dad played the piano and they'd be up till 4 a.m. and I would sing songs with them, and they were all like classic, like Broadway tunes and movie themes. And ironically, like one of their favorites was Days of Wine and Roses, which they had no clue it was about alcoholism and hitting their bottom, and they were all blasted out of their minds singing it. And I loved singing it with them, and I loved playing for my dad, and I loved sitting next to my dad when he played piano. But there was little or no time for like one-on-one because they had 8 months before, and it was like, go have fun on your own. So we were completely unsupervised in the woods, smoking pot, and drinking strohs from 8 and 9 years old all the way through college, whatever, barely getting out of SIU.
Did you have any in that era? Did you like who were like the dramatic actors that you were into at that point? Like, was it like Brando still? And was
Cagney.
Cagney?
Yeah, I cried when he died. It was the same year my mom had a heart attack and she survived it, but I think it was 88.
So Cagney, and then you also at the same time you had Bogey. You had was James Dean overrated?
It didn't touch my life, but I loved Natalie Wood. Cagney jumps out because he did like Yankee Doodle Dandy and sang and danced like a crazy man, but so sharp and like exact, like Aykroyd, exact in his delivery, exact in his dance numbers. Yeah, and loved White Heat and and then all the Frankenstein and Wolfman movies. I love Bela Lugosi and what's his name, Boris Karloff.
He's my great uncle actually, Boris Karloff.
Really?
Yeah. Changed his name from Slade because he thought it sounded too Jewish, so he turned it to Karloff.
All the children touched with all the children. I can't do it. What is it? The You Stole Christmas.
Who?
That's Forrest.
You're
Right? You there?
Yes, I am here now. Can you hear me? Damn it. Can you hear me? Are you? Hang on.
Yeah.
Hey, there you are. Can you hear me? Hey, can you hear me?
He came without Christmas cake just the same.
Oh man, hang on.
Should we restart?
No. We're not going to restart the whole show. I'm trying to just. Oh my lord! Here, we'll cut it. Hang on, I'll call you right back. We'll cut it into two parts.